Welcome back, brothers and sisters of Christ. My name is Brianna, and I'm back with another video. And for today's video is I have to do my Father's will. So we're going to pop this one off with some scripture. We got Matthew chapter 16, verse 21 through 23. And it says, "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed on the third day, be raised to life." Peter took it aside and began to rebuke him. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. "Never, Lord," he said. "This shall never happen to you." Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." So Peter was being used by the enemy, okay, unknowingly, apparently, to try to stop the Lord's plan. So that's why the Lord was saying, "Get behind me, Satan." Because at this point, if you're going against the Lord and his word and his plan and his will, you're being used by the enemy. You know what I'm saying? So he said, "You're a stumbling block. You know, you're getting in the way." And he also said, "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." I absolutely love that one, what he said there, because he was worried about the wrong things, which are human concerns and not the Father's will. Okay? Which we see a lot in our personal lives. But we're going to get to that. The second scripture we have is John chapter 18, 1 through 12, okay? So when he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side there was a garden, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the garden, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and the Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "I am he," Jesus said. And Judas the traitor was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again, he asked them, "Who is it that you want?" "Jesus of Nazareth," they said. Jesus answered, "I told you that I am he. If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Then the detachment of soldiers with its commanders and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him. All right. So, Jesus told him to put his sword away. "Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" And what Jesus meant by this, shall I not go through what I'm supposed to go through? This is the plan that the Father has for my life. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me, right? The cup in this passage is referring to God's will and the suffering that he's about to endure on the cross. Because the thing about it is, the arrest wasn't defeat. Peter didn't want him to get arrested. The arrest wasn't defeat, and his death was not the end. You know what I'm saying? This was all a part of God's plan, and Peter would be going against God's plan by trying to stop it. The cup represents everything, that Jesus was going to go through and endure. His arrest, the cross, death, resurrection, bearing sin, fulfilling prophecy. So Jesus was basically saying, this is my Father's will for my life, and I must go through it. And I love this because Jesus is showing us surrender, obedience, and trusting in God's plan, all while suffering, all while, you know what I'm saying? No matter how bad or how hard it looks to us or to others, which relates to us, because sometimes we don't want to drink the cup that the Father is giving us. You know what I'm saying? But it is necessary because the pain has a purpose, as we've seen with Jesus. The pain is not in vain. But these scriptures let us know that people will try to stop you from doing God's will. And it's not always on purpose. It's not always out of malice intent. It's not always out of jealousy or hate. but sometimes from genuine concern. Peter was concerned. You know what I'm saying? He's saying, Jesus telling them, like, I'm going to be put to death. I'm going to raise back in 3 days. And Peter looking like, put to death? Raised back in 3 days? You got to think about this is stuff that was unheard of in their time as well. So, he probably had a little doubt. Like, you raised back in 3 days. You know what I'm saying? And then when they came to arrest Jesus and stuff, that's his friend. Jesus, his friend. He going to defend him. So, he cut off the guy's ear. But what he didn't realize is he was interfering with God's plan. These were things that had to happen. These were things that was already written. The plan was already written. These were things that had to be fulfilled. And if it doesn't sound good to other people, if it doesn't make sense to other people, they don't understand it. Or, sometimes it's out of fear. People are not willing to go through what is needed to do the will of the Father out of fear. So they will try to stop you. And you will have to rebuke them. Because all that stuff that people are concerned about are human concerns. And God's plans is much greater than human concerns. This shows that God's plans often conflicts with human expectations. And we honestly, I'm pretty sure us as believers have seen this many times. People trying to stop us from doing something that God has called us to be. They're speaking doubt. They're speaking fear. I've talked about that. It doesn't make sense to them. You know what I'm saying? While Peter didn't mean any harm, he was trying to protect Jesus, but he was really not doing a good thing by trying to interfere with God's will. This also shows human fears versus trust in God, because the thing about it is Peter knew, okay? Peter knew that Jesus was the Messiah. Jesus told him, I'm going to die, but I'm going to raise in 3 days. So he was allowing human fear to take over instead of trusting, Jesus and what Jesus had already told him, which we also often do. Okay, Jesus been already told us what we need to do, what his will is for our life, and sometimes we get scared. We let our fears get into the way of what we already know that God said. Okay, instead of trusting in God, we let our fears get into the way. And then another point of view to look at this is that oftentimes other people will try to stop you from doing God's will because of their fears. So Peter was scared. He had his own fears going on. So he was trying to stop Jesus from doing the will of the Lord out of fear. But Jesus had already told him, well, this is what God wants. This is the will of my Father. This is what I got to do. But Peter, it just don't sound good. He didn't say that, but it sounded like this ain't sounding too well. So, looking at that from both sides is relatable. Because you can, we can be Peter. So, but yeah, so these examples shows that people don't understand the full plan of God in your life. Even when you done told them, like I said, Jesus had told them the plan, what was going to happen. Even when he told Peter, Peter still couldn't comprehend it. Peter still didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to him. So a lot of times, the will for God's life will not make sense to people until it completely unfolds. And that takes our obedience. You know what I'm saying? That takes for us to keep going when people try to stop us. It's going to take for us to have to rebuke some people sometimes. Because the Father's will must be done, baby. Okay? And once it's all complete, then they're going to see like, oh, okay. Now it makes sense. But see, in the process, it don't always make sense to the people around you. And you can tell them the plan from A to Z. But the thing about it is the Lord has given you the plan. He gave you the vision. He gave you the calling. This is the will for your life. So, of course, it's going to make sense to you. It's not going to make sense to them because this is not the plan for their life. You know what I'm saying? So, that's why it is important to know the plans that the Lord has for us and to stand firm in them and to not let anybody interfere because they will not understand the plans for your life. You know what I'm saying? So they don't know the full plans that God has for you. Sometimes we don't even know the full plans that the Lord has for us. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we don't even know what the Lord is going to ask of us, but we still must remain obedient. We still must remain faithful. We still must submit to his plan and submit to his will and surrender like Jesus, baby. Because it's all going to work out. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes you have to rebuke people when it comes to God's will, no matter if they're concerned or whatever the case may be. Because at the end of the day, their concerns are not greater than God's will. And you know, at this point in my life, doing God's will is so instilled in me and it's so important to me that I don't care what people say, because I already made it up in my mind that I will be doing my Father's will. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what nobody else doing, but I'm doing the will of my Father. I don't care how it looks. I don't care how it sounds. People might think you're crazy. I will be doing the will of my Father. So if anyone comes speaking against what my Father has told me to do, I'm going to let them talk. I'm going to let them waste their breath. I'm going to let them finish what they need to say. And then I'm going to let them know that I will be doing whatever the Lord tells me to do. I will be doing the will of my Father. Let thy will be done, not mine. Let thy will be done, not yours. You know what I'm saying? So, and you know, when you have already made up your mind that your life is not your own and that you're living for God and God alone, there's nothing that no one can say or do to change your mind when you have already made your mind up that you are doing the will of your Father. You know what I'm saying? Because there will be people who will try to stop you, and again, you have to rebuke them like Jesus did Peter. Don't allow anyone to be a stumbling block in your life. Because, baby, I don't know about nobody else, but I'm about my Father's business. I have to do the will of my Father. Like, it has to be done. And one thing I loved about Jesus was that he was going to always make it be known and remind you why he was there and what he was there to do, which was his Father's will. He wasn't allowing anyone to come between his Father's will. That will was going to be done regardless of anything. And that's how we must be about our Father's business. That's how we must be about our Father's will. That his will comes before anything. So I'm gonna read just, you know, what Jesus was saying about his Father's will. So we got John chapter 4, verse 31 through 34, and it says, meanwhile, his disciples urged him, Rabbi, eat something. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you know nothing about. Then his disciples said to each other, could someone have brought him food? My food, Jesus said, is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Okay? That's how serious the Lord's will, God's will, was to Jesus. He said, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. We got John chapter 6, verse 38, and it says, for I have come down from heaven not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. You know, because sometimes we be thinking we finna do our own will, and it ain't about ours. It's about the Lord's will. We have to do our Father's will. And we can't let nobody interfere or get in the way of it. We cannot. When you walk this walk, when you surrender to the Lord, you are surrendering and submitting to his will for your life. You know, some people get on this walk and they want to pick and choose what it is they want to do and what it is they're willing to do and what it is they want to be obedient and faithful to, what it is they want to submit to, what it is they want to surrender to. That's not how it works. You must surrender all things. You must submit to all things. You must do the will of God. You know what I'm saying? This is what we're here for, is to do the will of God. We're not here for all this nonsense that's going on in the world. And I know that oftentimes we forget that we're not here to do our own will. And God's will for your life will be different what it is for my life. And that's why we have to stop trying to talk people out of doing the things that they told you. If somebody come and tell me that God told them to do something, I ain't saying nothing. Don't even fix your lips, because don't fix your lips and say nothing to me. If I done told you that God told me to do something, don't fix your lips to talk against what I told you that God done told me to do. Because people get too comfortable. Who are you to tell somebody what God told them to do, or try to stop them, you know, to do what God has told them to do. You know, you're being used by the enemy. You pray for people and you keep it moving. But it's so important to be close with the Lord, because you know, y'all hear me talk about this all the time, like confidence. Because when you're not confident enough in what God told you to do, in his voice, in his will for your life, you know, people like Peter, even if it's not intentionally like trying to stop you and interfere or come between, you know, they'll have you doubting, or they'll have you scared, like, oh, maybe you're right, but they're not right. You know what the Father told you to do. You know what his will for your life. You've been seeking him. You've been in the secret place. You've been in his word. He revealed to you what it is, what his will is for your life. So when you already know, you can't allow people to get to be speaking on stuff that they don't know, because they don't know the Father's will for your life. You do. And that's why we got to be so confident in it. You got to know what the Father's will for your life is. Because once you know what the Father's will for your life is, you get set in it. And you know that there's nothing else that I'd rather be doing but my Father's will. And there's nothing that nobody can do or talk you out of doing his will. We got to be like Jesus. Because, oh, he was about his Father's business. We got to be like Jesus. Okay? Because, you know, and a lot of times the Lord have us do things that it be sounding crazy sometimes. It'll look crazy sometimes. But, you know, the Lord is not sending us places to do things and say things for no reason. And when you walk with the Lord, you can't be fearful of the things that he's calling you to do, because you know you walk with the Lord, so it ain't nothing to be scared about. But we know that the things that the Lord will ask us to do is not the norm, you know. And we know that a lot of times those things are fearful for people that's in the world, and it don't make sense for people that's in the world. But when you walk with the Lord, you know what's up. And because you know what's up, you cannot allow people to come between you and your Father's will. Okay? Rebuke him in the name of Jesus. It's hot. But yes, if this word is not for you, it's for somebody else. Remember, I'm telling y'all this because I love y'all. God bless.